I thought I'd revisit all-wheel drive cars, particularly street cars, not race cars, because of the physics changes of 1.15 updates. And two cars, two setups for two cars, so 4 setups. Let's get into it. Alright, first starting off with the Subaru, and the next car is the GR Yaris. And the first setup is a comfort medium tire setup. And with the comfort medium tires in most cars, the front springs don't get soft enough, the rear brake bias doesn't go back far enough, and so the setups have to be a little bit strange to get the cars to rotate on the brakes so they don't understeer. And a comfort medium tire is a pretty good track day tire. Maybe comfort soft would be a really good track day tire that puts out times that you would see at a track day with normal cars, not like supercars or high performance cars. Onto the settings. Go to the mods, no modifications, just a brake controller. Oh, sport brake system. This is supposed to be normal. I'll leave it as it is because that's how I've been driving it. Let's see. The suspension. So because of the tire grip level and the weight balance of the car, which is 60-40 on the, if you look to the left here, I set up the Subaru like a front wheel drive car with very little anti-roll in the rear and a lot of anti-roll in the front to maximize front axle traction. And then the rear anti-roll is to cause what's called a roll oversteer. And in combined effect while braking, the roll oversteer while braking causes an effect called jacking, where the front end dives and the body rolls, lifting the inside rear tire off the ground. And it doesn't have to be completely off the ground, but it de-weights the inside rear tire. Anyway, this is the almost lowest setting on the front spring, and this is what I found for the rear natural frequency to provide good balance between roll oversteer and soft rear end. I don't want the rear end too stiff. General cambers, I'm not going to maximize the camber angles. I'm not going to test. It takes a long time to test out the camber angles, so these are my generic camber angles for skinny tires. And four-wheel drive, generic differential settings. Maximum front acceleration lock, maximum braking lock, so that prevents the inside front tire from locking up. Generally, when braking, the car is generally going in a straight line, and even when trail braking, you're not going to have so much steering angle that you need to have an open differential in the front on any front driven car. So maximum braking lock 60. It says level 60, it might be 60%. If you really calculate the angle, the difference between the inside tire and the outside tire speed based on the radius of your trail braking, it's probably not going to exceed a difference of 60% lock, like the locking difference. So a difference of 30% speed difference. I don't know if this is actually 60% lock, it just says level. So I don't really know what that is in translation to a real differential. 40-60 front torque distribution. It could be lower for a little bit more oversteer on throttle. And onto the drive. Oh, and this particular car, just as the setup says, it needs no ABS. It needs ABS off to get the oversteer on the brakes because of the, as mentioned at the beginning of the video, the traction limitations. There's settings limitations that prevent the car from getting brake oversteer with these tires. And let's drive it. We're driving with the manual stick shifts. So this is, I want that. This is the brake oversteer that I want. and that was intentional to show the brake oversteer. And with ABS, I'll do a lap without ABS, or with ABS, I mean. And as you can see with the yellow ABS designation on the left, bottom left, that means it's off. A little too much throttle on exit. It's a strange corner with this gearing. I need to be in second to get the maximum torque out of the turn, but it's a really short shift out of the exit there. Again, too much throttle. Really easy to control with the four-wheel drive. A lot of high-speed oversteer. Again, a weird corner for second gear. Get a short shift out of the corner so I don't hit the rev limiter. Very good control on the brakes. I can make it oversteer if I want by doing that. And that's what I like on the brakes, is that I have a choice to shell brake really deep into the corners and have control. It doesn't just go in a straight line on the brakes. That was a sloppy corner there. I didn't do a very particularly quick lap, but I'm going to drive with the ABS on now, set to weak, which is my preferred setting. And I'm going to try to get it to oversteer in a proper corner. If you notice, the brake bias is all the way rearward. That's one of the limitations of the setups, or setup limitations, is I can't move the brake bias any further back. And I can't make the front spring any softer either. Well, with this one I can go a little bit softer, but not much. So I can't get that oversteer on the brakes that I was displaying earlier, but it still has good control. I can get a decent shell brake into the corner. That was really sloppy. I was trying to get it to oversteer on the brakes. Excuse me, lost my voice. Trying to get it to oversteer on the brakes into the hairpin. So I took it slow because it just wouldn't oversteer. Oops, that was bad throttle input. So it's basically drivable. It can be driven with ABS. It's just, it doesn't do the oversteer on the brakes that I like. A little bit too fast in the first section here, so I had to go slow on the second half of that S-bend. See if I can get a rotate. Yeah, no rotation. It points well, like the front end steers into the corner on the brakes, it just won't rotate any more than what it just did. There's some understeer. Alright, and on to the second setup, which I'm going to do right now. The second setup is going to be on the sports tire. And you'll see the setup differences because the tire is grippier. Car settings, track 101. So onto the settings. And these would be my preferred, or similarly, I would like a stiffer front spring than the rear on the other setup, but I can't achieve that because, or basically it's all around too stiff. Let's go back to the other setting so I can talk about it. So this setting here, 1.33, which it can go down to 1.30, is actually relatively stiff for a street car. My Genesis stock has a natural frequency of 0.8, which is a little bit lower, you know. So, this doesn't go that low. It only goes to 1.3. And so, with a softer front spring, I could achieve different performance than what I have set up here. I could have a stiff anti-roll in the rear, and it'd be softer than this, but a stiffer front spring than the rear if I can go even lower. I want some more weight transfer, essentially, is what I'm saying here. And back to the other setting. With the grippier tires, there is enough weight transfer to have my preferred setup, which is, it's not fine-tuned, it's just thrown together pretty quickly. Brake bias is actually forward, -4 forward, and stiff anti-roll in the rear. What that does is it allows the rear end to plant into on the exit. So when you get on throttle, the anti-roll prevents the roll, and the soft spring allows the car to squat a little bit, so it gives a really good traction on the rear of the car. And then this I would prefer to be even stiffer than the rear, but in this game the damping only goes to 40% compression critical damping. So 40% is 40% of critical damping, and you have to look up what critical damping is to understand what 100% is. And so what that means is that if I have this anti-roll set to 10, it'll perform better when I'm gripping. But because the damping is so low, the anti-roll is also a spring, and it acts as, it causes fluctuations in the weight transfer, so that the car becomes very difficult to catch and slides. So I usually don't go over 8 level anti-roll in the front on any car, because it makes it easier to catch slides. I would prefer stiffer front anti-roll bar, but the setup limitations don't allow me to run a stiffer front anti-roll bar. And these are the torque settings. Oh, and I do have a more rearward power torque distribution. And again, showing that. Alright, do I have the sports brakes? Yes, I do. Normal pads. Now onto the drive of this car. And this is to be driven with ABS on. I already have it on. And you can see I'm going to get the car to rotate on the brakes without having weird anti-roll settings like a front-wheel drive car. I don't remember the braking zones. I know it's later. So with these tires, I'm going to take this in third. Hopefully I'm going fast enough on the apex. Yeah, quick enough. Second would probably be faster, but third is easier to exit the corner with. Nice rotation on the brakes. That's too much rotation. But that is what I like in pretty much every car. And mid-engine cars in this game, it's easier to achieve. Stand third here. It's easier to achieve the brake rotation, or a rotation on the brakes, because of the weight distribution and the way the brake bias is set up in this game. Is if the weight is more rearward, the brake bias range is also more rearward. A little bit slow on the apex. Not used to the grippier tires. I was driving the comfort mediums a lot, and 20 is pretty average for these tires with this car. Alright, on to the GR Yaris. Alright, car settings. Let's just compare the previous setting to this setting. I have a little bit stiffer front natural frequency, same rear frequency. The car has a shorter wheelbase, so I have different torques on the differentials. Brake bias is the same. Also, no modifications. And there's not much to say about it. I've already said everything about the Subaru, but I'm going to start with the comfort mediums. This has the same problem. There's not enough grip, and the setup limitations don't allow me to get the rotation on the brakes. So I have these really weird suspension settings, particularly the anti-roll, set up like a front-wheel drive car because of the weight distribution. Soft front spring, and a particular, very specific rear spring to get the performance I want out of the rear end. And I've already said this about the Subaru. So let's drive it. Let me turn the ABS off. I made this car a little bit more stable because it rotates a lot more than the Subaru because of the wheelbase. So what I think I need to do to get more rotation out of the car is to open up the front initial torque. That's a little bit wide. There's the rotation on the brakes. This has a more composed slide than the Subaru. Well, apart from that time, this is the weight transfer. because of the differential settings. So the sliding is a little bit more gradual. What I was relying on with the Subaru was the brake lift oversteer, where the initial torque was lower than this one anyway. Stay in third here, I think. And that causes the initial torque on the differential, that is. That causes the car to rotate when lifting off the brakes, which I need to do with this car a little bit. I have too much initial torque on the front end. Oh, wide. Yeah, not enough rotation on the brakes. So I'm going to make a couple setup changes and drive this car one more time. Get a lap down. Okay. All right. So the changes I'm going to make are to the differential. It has 38 in the front. Go to 37 and bring this down to 5. It might be too much. Let's see how this does. A little bit better rotation. I think it needs more or less initial torque on the front again. I only went down 1 point on the front. It goes sideways. It doesn't like rotate on the center. Okay, let's see if I can drive clean from here. All right, for the rest of the lap, drive clean. Good rotation. Too much throttle. Getting a lot of understeer mid-corner. I need more rotation on the brakes. That's normal for how I usually tune four-wheel drive cars. Get a lot of rotation on the brakes and then understeer mid-corner. I just didn't tune enough oversteer on the brakes with this one. I'm getting some, as you can see right there. I'm barely turning the wheel and the car is turning into the corner. Anyway, all you have to do is reduce the initial torque on the front axle. Oh, missed my gear. Alright, that's that car. It's a more stable car with these weird settings. And then onto the sports tires. what was the brake bias at? Okay, 5 there. Okay. On to the sports tires. Already talked about this, just a quick overview. And the brake bias. Alright. And to compare the brakes. As you can see, there's that brake oversteer, a little too much. That brake oversteer that was lacking in the previous setting. Oh, I need ABS on. Let's restart that lap. Very nice and composed on the entry. I'm going to try to get the oversteer here. There it goes a little bit. I'm going a little bit slow on the apex because I'm not used to the tires again. There's the brake oversteer. That was a sloppy entry. Entered, there it is, there's the oversteer. I was underspeeding the corner, so I couldn't get the car to rotate on the brakes, because otherwise I'd be pretty much stopping on the apex. All right, I'm gonna let the replay play. And that's pretty much it. That's all I have to talk about. Just to recap, the comfort tires don't have enough grip for the setup ranges of the suspension and the brake bias. But the sports and racing tires do have enough grip for the setup ranges of the spring rates and brake bias. Till the next one.